between the risk appetite of pension and insurance companies and the actual credit rating of a lot of infrastructure SPVs. So it was thought that partial guarantee would sort of bridge the gap and will be able to scale up the rating or enhance the rating so that there will be a lot of investor interest. Unfortunately, between all the rating agencies put together, we would have rated not more than 5 transactions, and none of them have actually hit the market so far. There are several reasons for that, which I am not going into right now. Similarly, a municipal sector, it's widely recognized given the state of urban infrastructure, is that sector which requires a lot of funds to carry out the development activities. About 10-12 years back, we had rated what was thought to be a pioneering transaction in Tamil Nadu. It was called the pooled finance, whereby a group of some 15 municipalities came together and a bond was raised by an entity known as Tamil Nadu Water Supply and Sanitation Pooled Fund, with several layers of credit enhancement built into it, which included interception of the devolution from state SFC devolution to the states, which included a bond reserve account, which included guarantees from USAID. And actually the structure has worked well. It was rated AA. There was a lot of investor interest, but that was the only transaction which has come in the last 8 or 10 years. So again, what exactly are the issues? There are several questions, but I don't have the ready answers for that. Possibly the only thing which has really taken off is the takeout financing which is being offered by IFCL. And also what we have seen is some traction in terms of securitization of annuity receivables, etc. So basically what I'm trying to say is that at least for projects which have reached COD and are performing well, there are some avenues which are coming up in terms of refinancing the bank's exposures. But in terms of funding greenfield projects or projects which have not reached COD or have just started operations, despite quite a few initiatives which are there, somehow the track record is really not been as good.
Well,
so I'm actually going to take a step away from the infrastructure and in the corporate side, talk perhaps more about the consumer side challenges and the credit gaps in some form that exist there. Just throw some initial numbers at you, and like I said, as my colleague indicated, I'm going to try and keep this brief and possibly pick more stuff up if there are any questions that come in later. We have an estimated about 120 million consumers who are credit active in this country. No, yes, I actually said 120 million credit active consumers against a base of our population of something like about 1.3 billion. You can see these numbers are reasonably stark. We're talking about 10% of the people in this country having access to formal credit. And when I say formal credit, this is from the banking system. There is of course a small microfinance segment that's in place. There's also a self-help group structure in place and so on. But it must be apparent when I talk about these numbers that there is a large gap in terms of the ability of people to access credit. When we look beyond the urban areas, this becomes a lot more stark. And most of this 120 million, by the way, would be perhaps focused more on the urban and the suburban sectors rather than anywhere approaching rural. Now, the issues really on this front have been associated, as Mr. Gopalakrishna said earlier on, very, very classically with the information asymmetry. For example, the bureau structure in this country is about a couple of years old. There are a few people who are in play there. But if you look at just the amount of information that's available, that can be used to evaluate a rural borrower today, there's an absolute dearth of information that's there. We do, however, have some solutions on hand as well. Things are not as bleak as they look. Consumer growth itself, consumer credit growth itself is something that's been going at a fast clip over the last couple of years. Last 8-10 years, we've been recording at least about 15% odd. It can grow at a similar pace. But what we need is a sort of a multiplier, a force multiplier of sorts to reach this large 400 and 500 million strong population that's there in the rural belts that we can give credit to. Now, we will have to look at some slightly non-traditional means of doing this. And a couple of thoughts have been in trying to see if we can use information that's available in historically non-credit areas, like for example telecom, utilities, etc., to establish the identity as well as the as a base credit profile of the individual, and then use that as a basis for evaluating the individual to give them the initial lines of credit. There are a lot more other thoughts that are in play. I mean, if you look at the credit challenge, it isn't just in terms of the demand, it's also in terms of putting the infrastructure in place to be able to address some of these pieces. Like, for example, the right kind of KYC being available at the consumer end. Aadhaar is sort of stepping into bridge a bit of this gap. I won't still say that they are completely there, but you know, about a large chunk of these customers are starting to get covered by an identity tool, which is really useful. There is then the whole challenge of trying to ensure that the financial system is kept reasonably clean of intent issues of these individuals who will access credit. And then there's a whole challenge on the credit and the credit underwriting piece that I talked about earlier. So, you know, in broad thought, I just say that at the consumer level, the challenge is in terms of sheer numbers. The last mile connectivity is a big piece that has become a lot more prominent in terms of, let's say, telecom infrastructure, etc., coming into play right now. The means of leveraging this, the means of ensuring that, for example, information companies such as credit bureaus are appropriately leveraged by the banks to get to the kind of credit penetration that we need to get to is going to be a key piece as we go you know, into the next decade. I'll stop there and pass it back.
Thank you. Of course, you have heard from both the supply side and the demand side of the credit gap. I know because of the overshooting of the previous sessions, we have a time constraint, but still one or two questions from the members. Yeah. Yeah.
I can see a couple of hands.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you mentioned about the overseas fund which comes, the blended cost of hedging is far more expensive than the domestic money that one can mobilize. Now, the big reason is the hedging cost which is there. While the currency has been fluctuating and we've seen where it has moved over the last couple of years, what are the other dynamics which really builds in the hedging cost to be so high to make it completely unviable, and what can be done on that? Because on the other side, I also see those in the newspapers about the forex inflows being at the all-time high and the reserve being at the all-time high. So where are those money going in then?
So basically your question is that how can you reduce the hedging cost?
Yeah, so what are the underlying dynamics which makes the hedging cost being so unviable and expensive?
Okay, see, essentially there's a vibrant forex market in India with authorized dealers, but the market is not very deep. It's a shallow market. So what happens is that even if there's a deal of say some tens and millions of US dollars, suddenly the market moves. So unless this market is deep, so you know, you really can't do anything to make the market deep. The market evolves by itself. Hedging cost is market determined. Now the way hedge cost is determined is by the difference in your interest rates. So because interest rates in India are high and overseas they are much lower, and that itself is a function of inflation. So it's more of a macroeconomic issue. So unless that gets corrected, you know, you can't have some other mechanism to reduce the hedging cost.
Yeah.
So my question is to Anjan and maybe to other banking people if there's someone around over here. So there was this clarification rather which had come from RBI last month or so that, you know, it was just a technical clarification that the banks can now lend to infra companies on a 5x25 schemes. So technically, you know, though the loan could be of 25, maybe of a 5-year, but they can have the cash flows matched to the repayment of the debt obligation. So technically, the repayment would be happening over 25 years with the implicit assumption that, you know, within 5 years it would be refinanced. So this really sorts out all the problems which have been there with the banking industry, right? So liability profile all matched, 5 years refinancing done. Asset quality seems to be much better in the new regime because cash flows would be much lesser. If the asset quality is better, you know, the ratings can also be improved from the rating agency, thus they would have a lower capital charge. So the question is this really a revolutionary step which has been now taken by the RBI, which could really, you know, change the entire systemic thing, all the negative which have been there in the system for the banking industry? And a follow-up question of the same thing is basically to Dilip, or basically to the IFCs and all, you know. So if all those negatives which are there for the banking industry, which had really, you know, flourished the IFC business or the infrastructure finance companies based upon the arbitrage. So if that arbitrage is not really available to the IFCs anymore, so yeah, the banks can now raise the infra bonds and all, no PSL, no CRR, no SLR. So does it really question the basic business model of the IFCs in the current scenario, the way we talk as of now? Thank you.
A number of questions, I think. The first one, I don't think it solves all the problems of the banks. There are
Very
several
true.
problems the
This is
banks
one
are
of them.
confronted with. I think the only thing it solves is the asset liability mismatch. I mean, one of the biggest problems or complaints which the banks had is that, the concession period extends for 25 years, 30 years. Cash flows will be available for 30 years, whereas you are expected to repay with loan with a tenure of 10 years or 12 years. Or 15 years at best. So clearly there was a mismatch in the initial years. So that is a problem which is taken care of because of this 5-25 type of a scheme. I think sir would be in a better position to explain the entire perspective.
Moreover, basically it is from the borrower side,
Yeah.
it is going to be.
So it takes care of the asset liability mismatch. Now, how we will approach it in terms of rating, I mean that is something, it's too early because one hasn't seen any transaction as yet. Because actually the dilemma will be that all the debt servicing ratios will look very good because your interest, there is no principal repayment. I mean essentially it's entirely refinancing. And one is assuming that refinance will happen without any problem. But the issue is if that fifth year is, let's say, falls in 2008-9 type of a scenario, then what happens? I mean, when all banks are starved of capital, and even otherwise, I mean, this is just one part of the story. In general, banks, because of Basel III, will have huge capital requirements, and how much they will be able to raise given the 51% public shareholding, I mean, government shareholding, and all those. I mean, those issues are there. So that's only. What was your second question on this?
Yeah, so basically on the asset quality, so as I was saying, the cash flow is no principal to be repaid. So that way, I think it will be very difficult for any infra lending to get into the NPA category from that perspective, because all these years they just have to service the interest and the principal really.
Yeah, because it's entirely shifts to refinancing. So that way it definitely helps in terms of
Some relief.
taking care of temporary cash flow mismatches.
But it's not something which is like very revolutionary as of now.
Not really. It
We
will
don't
ease
see
the
the-
credit flow to the infrastructure sector. That's about it.
So, and I think otherwise, thank you once again for giving us this opportunity. I'm sure that with this limited time given, we could come to your expectation. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists.